Hello, we are live. One
Hello.
more Startup Cities live. Now we are uh, being successful in keeping the rhythm every week. So we are missing today Kim, but she's she's traveling. That's fine. So Startup Cities live is just uh, a space where we can bring friends and founders and builders in the network state or startup society, network society space, and understand these projects more in details, and also bring the latest news in the space, the protocols, crypto protocols, uh, special economic zones, and everything related to this new emerging industry. So today we have with us Sam Delesque. He's a ecological designer and software engineer. He's the creator of traditional drink factory, the first tokenized eco village in Europe, and OASA, a network dedicated to conserving 100,000 hectares of land through community ownership. He joined us to discuss the future of living, decentralized governance, and how to build a village from scratch. Sam, great to have you here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to meet you.
Amazing. So today, uh, Eric, how is it going?
Pretty good. It's still early in the morning, but let's get this live going.
Nice. So today, who is going to lead the conversations? Eric. Eric
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to do it.
is very
um,
excited about the. I've been listening many good things about Sen and what he's building in Europe. Very nice to see like real concrete projects and in land on site. So and also connecting with Web3 and governance and decentralized governance. So yeah, that's jump right in.
well, disclaimers, I've been to TDF. I have a token from TDF and not financial advice, but like there are very few projects that are as developed. And I think like we've already covered the project in the newsletter because there's a lot of new things happening there. But the first thing we should start with is trying to clarify for people who don't necessarily know what is OASA, what is TDF, and what is Closer, because you're the founder of all three and they're very much related. So can you explain to us?
Yeah, sure. So, they're basically all facets of the same coin. Basically, OASA is an ecological network. So, we are seeding and establishing that is looking at seeing how we can use technology to transition real estate as an asset class, as a force for good, as a force for conservation, for working with nature and within nature. TDF is our first implementation of this design and principles. And so TDF is an actual property in Portugal, 25 hectares of land with an old chicken farm that we're slowly converting into a mix of co-living, co-housing, event space, makerspace, food forest, water retention landscapes, biodiversity zones, and so on. And at the same time, in order to enable all of this, we needed a technology platform. And while there's been a lot of experiments in the Web3 space, there's very few projects that actually connect to real land. And so we needed to build some custom pieces to make that possible. So basically, we've been developing a platform that can enable future generations of villagers to tap into the whole technologies that we built. And you can think of Close as a simple, more decentralized Airbnb style uh, booking platform where you can have access to token dynamics, being able to sell a token to give future access rights to a piece of land, and basically we've been building up in this platform pretty much everything that we need for it. So we've even been integrating governance stack, finance, like reporting, even all the way down to accounting, automating or accounting for the local project here in Portugal, but also automating accounting at the Swiss level where our nonprofit is registered. And yeah, all these kind of things that you need when you have physical space on the ground. So that's a little bit the overview of the three entities. They are basically each like one facet of another. They're basically all falling under OASA, if you want. OASA being the long-term stewarding entity for this whole ecosystem that we're creating, and Closer is basically just a tech platform that falls under it, and Closer is now actually fully integrated under OASA as well. So yeah, all of the facets are kind of under the same umbrella, if you want, but we separated them so that they are each uniquely scalable. So TDF is scalable in the sense that we can build a few more houses and we can expand a bit the activities and so on, but it really very much stays within the confines of the current defined scope of land, which is this little piece of Portugal next to the village of Abella. But the scale, for example, of Closer is that we're able to scale that up to any number of villages across any region in the world. And so anyone can basically leverage the technologies that we built towards their own purpose.
You already have other projects coming under that umbrella?
Yeah, so we have currently 6 projects that are using Closer. So that means 6 projects that are using the technologies that we built. For example, one that we were pioneering together with Dark Matter Labs in Berlin is called MOS. MOS is a very big like community center in the heart of Berlin. They have like 10,000 square meters of building. It's an old bastard factory, and in there you can find all kind of economic activities, from saunas and different kind of small scale companies, as well as a co-living. And we were basically supporting a vision for creating the first free house in Berlin, so a house that owns itself rather than being owned by a for-profit entity or something similar. That project has been a little bit on pause for us right now. There's been a lot of stakeholders around it, but we have other projects that we're working with as well. There's Lias Labs in Poland. They're more of a educational / research center, and they have like a pop-up, a bit of a pop-up village in the summer months in the desert in Poland, where they host this kind of ecological transformation and artistic residencies. Then we also have a couple of more projects. One is in Egypt, on the Nile, on indigenous lands. We have another project in Portugal called Foz da Cova, which is more restoring an old existing village, and a few other projects like this. And yeah, essentially we're still very much in the early days of onboarding projects into Closer. It's slowly becoming more of a reality. But there is definitely the potential to scale up Closer as soon as we see enough traction on the more physical side of things.
So it's very diverse in terms of projects, and you're providing the framework for people to build the community around tokens and all the tools around booking and managing the community. And from memory, OASA is a DAO, right? In Switzerland.
OASA essentially is a nonprofit, which is also a network of DAOs, which currently only hosts a single DAO, which is TDF. So TDF is basically a DAO under the OASA framework. So you can think of OASA as a network state, but an ecological network state, where the intention is to put constitutional boundaries on what can and cannot be done on a piece of land. And those boundaries are all related to ecological stewardship, but also to decentralization of the governance. So basically, what it imposes on the land is that the land will be regenerated and conserved for future generations, while the access to that land will be distributed to a community of people, and the governance of it will be done in a decentralized manner. So that's kind of the constitutionality of OASA that we are putting in place on the physical project. And then within those constraints, basically we have the what we described as projects within OASA, which is basically a collection of, first of all, a real piece of land with a real company sitting on it, with a DAO to handle the governance, with its own token, so that each plot of land has its own sovereignty. It can choose how much it wants to participate in the network and so on. And with that comes its own treasury.
Can we go a bit deeper on the tech? Because, like, I feel like our audience would understand some of this. There's a lot of people working on tokens for governance, on real estate tokenization, on RWA, but like you've done it, so it's very impressive. And then clearly, we'd love to hear like experience or the small things, like I know proof of presence, for example, is a good framework.
Yeah, so first of all, in the governance realm, when we started this project, we realized that, well, DAOs are quite limited. When you think of a group of anonymous people on the internet that can make some decisions together, a lot of it is based on how many tokens they hold. And so a lot of that is just tied to financial value, which is not something that is necessarily bad, but this is kind of just operating a standard company. What we wanted to take it a few steps further, and it was to look what is a meaningful act of contribution that you can bring to the land that would grant you governance right to be able to be part of making the decisions of how that land is going to evolve and continue. And so the main point that we found is what actually makes sense is presence. How many days per year do you physically spend in that space? And that being the best indicator of how much governance power you should have. So think of current democracies as binary. You're either a citizen or you're not. In our case, you can be a citizen and you can come and, for example, spend 10 days every year. You can spend 30 days every year or 300 days every year. And based on that, you can have a more fluid type of governance, which is based on how much time do you actually spend there. Because one of the challenges for us is that we're trying to mix spaces which both have more like short-term visits, people that come for a few weeks or a few months. We have people that live there full-time on site. We have citizens that maybe spend 1 month every year and keep returning. So you kind of have all the different ranges. And we really wanted to cater to this type of citizen that are global roaming, that don't necessarily identify with a specific nation state, but that might spend their time across various countries and locations. Some of it is digital nomadism, but it's also semi-nomadism or just people that are entrepreneurs, so they have a bit more freedom and these kind of things. And I think it's just a model that makes sense for where we are as a civilization, that we don't need to be stuck to one specific space to make our decisions and so on. And so by just introducing this proof of presence, basically that's a way to start rewarding other things than just financial behavior, and something very concrete and tangible that you can understand by by just spending time in a place. The second governance metric is obviously like the holdage of TDF tokens itself. And so that's a bit more tied to, let's say, your stake in the project, because those tokens corresponds your access right to be able to come and spend time here. But you are able to resell those or do other things with those tokens eventually. So by you showing that you still hold the token, that means that you have a stake in the project. And then the third metric that we're putting in place is proof of sweat. That's simply how much work did you actually put in the project. And we can measure that by, for example, well, the way the proof of sweat has been set up basically is we reserve 20% of the initial token cap towards rewarding people that are actually working in the project. And so that creates a framework for onboarding people that might not have the financial resources to be able to come in and actually earn their way into having a right to live in the project. And so we also recognize that if you're working inside the project, you're also going to have a higher level of context, and you will be probably more apt at making good governance decisions. So by holding sweat tokens, that also increases your governance power.
Yeah. Anything on the RWA side, tokenization of land, of how Have you done anything legal?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people talk about RWAs as like, let's just put this property on an NFT and call it a day. That really didn't resonate with our philosophy. I think if tokenizing land just means shifting the land registry to become something digital, I think we're losing a huge opportunity in that process to really reimagine what it means to inhabit land. And so we kind of designed a system from scratch that is, yeah, based on different values, I would say. And one of the core values is that OASA is an ecological network. By purchasing the tokens, it comes with the access right to be able to come and spend time, the user fruits, if you are looking at Latin roots. And it also comes with the duty to be a good steward of the land, because that is literally your contractual agreement with the project. It is that whatever happens, the land will be regenerated and we're going to be replenishing the commons. So those rights basically map way more to what indigenous people called stewardship. Indigenous people didn't have the sense of ownership, which means the right to extract from the land or the right to destroy the land. This right is something that was encoded in Latin law. Latin law defines ownership as the right to use, the right to get the fruit of, and the right to destroy. And so we're trying to shift that definition of ownership into something that we can get behind, something that makes way more sense when talking about land. And if you think about it, land ownership, it seems very ubiquitous right now for our generation, but it's really a very new thing. Like, it's only in the last 300 years that the world has been completely privatized. Before that, even the concept of owning land was something very alien for most people. So really what feels natural in this kind of capitalistic world is maybe not so natural as we think it is. And so we're much more looking at this kind of RWA from a, let's say, cooperative perspective of, okay, we actually have a group of people that steward this piece of land together, and what makes sense for them to own, well, it's access rights, so that they can actually live on the land, so that their basic needs can be met in terms of food, accommodation, access to fresh water, clean air, a nice forest to walk and relax, and all of these side benefits that we tend to omit in our society. And ultimately, the purpose of OASA is to prove that we can build a regenerative way of life, a way of life that's restoring nature while providing way more benefits to humans than our current societies does.
Can you give us some like examples of, so it's like ecological network state, and you sorry, and you encoded these rules into the governance framework. Can you give us some examples, like what that means? For example, what a resident should do regarding the land, how to conserve, like these kind of things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, what I've come to realize, really stepping into this project over the last years, is that in crypto we have this really strong individualism that underpins the ways we think about incentive mechanics and all of that. And this is great, but also if you're looking at like stewarding 100,000 hectares of land, what you're really looking at is maybe like a bit bigger scopes of the type of entities that are actually doing this work. So it's more about, let's say, committing your capital in the form of, committing to shift from land ownership to land stewardship, and having an organization, an entity that manages the land in a way that is in accordance with your values and with the values of the network. And the ways that manifest is we have our OASA principles, which you can find on the OASA website. And that stipulates certain things like 50% of the land is to remain wild or to be rewilded. And that's really the idea that what's been happening over the last 100 years is basically nature is running out of space, literally. Like this is why we're seeing a massive extinction event in terms of biodiversity. There's literally no spaces for wild species to even just exist, let alone having good places for habitats and food and so on. So we need to give space back to nature so that nature can grow back. And that means spaces without fences, spaces where we might have done some reforestation action or some water retention action, but where we then just leave it to itself. So that's one of the first thing, and that's like a pretty big commitment to put 50% of the land into rewilding. But then on the remainder of the land, the second stipulation is we're only going to be using 5% of the land for building human infrastructure, houses, etc., etc. So that already sets us to have 95% of the land as nature, with half of it being wild, and then the other half is basically designed for regenerative agriculture. So you're looking at agroforestry systems, syntropic forest, all kind of regenerative agriculture that serves more of a function, producing food for humans, but while also restoring the soil and restoring nature. And then there's a lot more small specific things, like for example, no single-use plastics, no pesticides, no fungicides, kind of all this side effect that we have from agriculture that maybe some people would use it to spray on their lawn, but generally it's more of an agricultural thing. And this is a real challenge of the planet today, is that most of the planet is desertifying because of intensive agriculture, because of using chemicals that are basically destroying the land, polluting the water streams, causing all the wildlife to die out, and eventually ending up in our food systems, and we end up with cancers and so on because of that.
I think he was also asking for like what are the citizens' requirements, like what do people need to do in terms of the manifesto, the rules, the ecosystem. And I want to add to that, what should they not do? Absolutely not.
Yeah, so at the OASA level, I mean, this is basically it. Like, you need to follow the regenerative principles, and you need to abide by our decentralization mechanics. Like, we don't want to have lands ruled by kings, but we want to have lands ruled by the people, based on a system of governance that incentivizes people to spend time there, that incentivizes people to do the work, and so on. So in terms of what you cannot do is breaching those rules, because then you're basically putting the entire project at risk. Because ultimately, what OASA can do if a project is non-complying with its principles is that it can basically remove a project, right? That would be like the ultimate kind of threat to the project. So the project has a really high incentive in actually applying those regenerative principles. And those things are being monitored. We are tracking, for example, carbon capture, which is also an ecosystem service that we provide, right? We're storing carbon into the land. And so that's a benefit not just for us, but actually for the entire humanity. We're also increasing biodiversity, and we're tracking that with eDNA monitoring, which means basically taking a sample of a body of water and then getting a full indication of all of the species that have interacted with that water and with the land surrounding it. And so by putting in place these methodologies of actually tracking the different ecological metrics that we want to cater towards, that means that we also have a way to monitor it and enforce possible action towards it. But I would say this is kind of the limits. Like, OASA wants to stay like a very light frame under which a lot of things can happen, right? Like, then once you have this general frame of, okay, we're going to be restoring land, then underneath that we have our DAO. So I would say most of the rest that happens in terms of like, what is a culture that we want to create, what is a program, what do people actually do on the ground, all these kind of things, all of this kind of operates within the DAO. So the DAO has a full mandate to kind of make whatever decisions it wants to, including deciding on, what is the infrastructure that we're developing together, how are we allocating the budgets to actually build the next infrastructure, and all these kind of actions. And I would say within TDF, I mean, there's many kind of overlaps of cultures that are coming at play and that are kind of merging. And, there's the Burning Man culture. A lot of us have been going to Burns for a while. And so this kind of sense of duocracy and creation is very much present. Like, we want to empower people to do the things that makes them feel alive, whether that's, managing the land and planting forest, or whether it's like coding an app in our co-working space, or whatever it is that you're passionate about, like pottery or music production, or all of this. The idea is that we have all of the facilities, the means of production that we can use towards creating. And it's more creating in the sense of play, in the sense of having fun doing something. Because I do think that we're also looking at a post-capitalistic, post-work culture that could come up pretty soon, where really the meaning of working is going to dramatically shift. It's not so much going to be about scaling up those industries to be super massive and drop down the unit cost and so on. I think the means of production are going to be more local in the future. That might look like having robotic arms in a workshop producing whatever goods that we want to have around us and that we need. While the data and the more digital part of it, that can be shared on a more global level. So sharing the model, sharing the technology on a global scale, but bringing back the materiality to a local level. That's a little bit the idea. And so you as a citizen that steps into that, you basically get a playground to operate within and to create whatever it is that drives you. And I mean, we have those, areas that tend to be quite present, from arts to land management to all kind of different events that we're hosting. So it's kind of like this overlap of activities that happen in the space.
Nice. And you said the people who operate there, they're more like a collective. So everyone can do different things. Like you have a chicken farm, you have a food forest, you have a mushroom farm. Um, how do you incentivize or manage? I don't know which one, but how do you get them to potentially make money from that work? Like, do you sell some of those mushrooms or veggies that you make? Or is it like more for internal use? Like, is there still a sense of capitalism, even though you're thinking for the post capitalism, labor world?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what we really want with the village is we want to prove that we can create a thriving economic model, right? Like, we want this model to be able to grow, which means that it will be able to acquire more land, conserve more land, regenerate more land. So for us, we need to have a very strong economic engine that can fund that. And the ways that you distribute those proceeds, that's like another question. But the engine itself, like, we're going to be exporting certain things, like whether it's accommodations in the rooms, like when they're not rented to token holders, for example, whether it's the restaurant that we are setting up, whether it's the mushroom farm that's producing both fresh mushrooms for the restaurant itself, so that it's being exported in the form of people eating food. But also we're producing medicinal mushrooms, tinctures, and supplements for all kind of needs. And basically anyone that comes and that has a dream of setting up a business can do so. I would say right now we're really in the build phase, as in we're establishing all of these businesses. And so people are getting rewarded with the future access right to this whole ecosystem that we are creating, right? We have 3 people working on the mushroom farm, and they're getting compensated by, first of all, having housing and food, and also future access right to the project in the form of tokens. So that means that we're slowly building up all of these different economic systems that eventually will be having a large surplus. And that surplus will basically be funding, first of all, the development of the land, acquiring more land, building more infrastructure, but also eventually paying salaries to the people who are actually operating the various parts of the business. And yeah, I believe that actually by creating these more circular economies, we're actually taking away a lot of the cost and enabling us to repurpose a lot of waste streams into resources. Some simple examples is, we have a mushroom farm. The mushroom farm is using substrate, which is wood chips and grains. And then after the mushroom farm has been producing mushrooms with that substrate, the substrate goes into a syntropic garden. It's feeding the trees, which means more fruit. And then more fruits means more food for the chicken. More food for the chicken means more eggs. More eggs means more food in the restaurant, and so on and so on. Like, the goal is to close as many loops as possible, working together with nature. Another example is, for example, we have a server farm in the back of our mushroom farm. Well, we have the space for a server farm. And so this is where the whole like digital infrastructure can be set up. And here, instead of looking at heat as a waste and as a problem, this becomes now a source that we can use, whether it's to heat up the mushroom farm in the winter, or heat up the greenhouse next to it, or heat up the pool, which is also next to it. So by integrating these elements, basically we can leverage the resources and get more yield out of combining those various systems together.
Do you also see the economic system being a closed environment, like with your own token being transacted within the same ecosystem? Or do you even consider having your own chain, like some groups are doing, to get like a fee on the transactions? Or even might as well think about special economic zone where you can have a free private city where you are developing this economic engine. What's your vision for the future?
I mean, I think those are all nice experiments. I think when I stepped into this whole game, which like I was already thinking about this in 2018, initially I was kind of against the idea of launching our own token because it felt like adding a lot of overhead. Like we're already reinventing so many systems from scratch and rebuilding a lot of the layers of society from scratch, that for us right now it's a great partnership with the Portuguese government to be able to be a tourism project that also has access to healthcare and all of these other services that we're not really in a position to be providing at this point, at least. I think the economic system that we're creating, we do want to have this kind of internal value circulation, just like you have it in co-ops, like having an internal currency to circulate the value between different businesses is a huge optimization because you're not paying taxes when you're transferring credits from one unit of production to another. So basically, as long as you're playing inside of this game, it's already super efficient. Of course, we could imagine things on a bigger scale eventually, and we would have a lot of the building blocks in place. But for now, this feels like already like a lot to put our teeth on.
Yeah, fair enough. You also made a lot of friends in the space. What's your interaction with the other projects, whether it's a refi or actually more like land-based projects? Um, like maybe you can go give examples or shield some friends projects.
Yeah, so I mean, back 5 years ago, I started an organization called Rebuild, which was an event network for people building regenerative villages. So I've been deep in that space of nourishing the connections and inviting people to copycat each other and to learn from each other and to reimagine what these regenerative villages can be, because we're kind of bringing a new wave of villages that are a bit different from the previous wave of eco villages. The previous wave of eco villages tended to be, a group of friends want to have this secluded life and they buy a piece of land and they want to be disconnected from the world. We think of it kind of the opposite. It's like if we want to actually change the world, we need to be embedded within the socioeconomic systems on a global scale, and we need to be integrated with all these other spaces that want the same. Without that, there's not going to be any significant change, and we're just going to be kind of fading away in the background. So that's why we're really close to a lot of land-based projects, really anywhere in the world, like in South Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, and so on and so on, and also ones that I already mentioned that are on Closer, for example. I think the ways of collaborating is, well, and the first thing I would say about it is that also there's such a huge range of projects, right? Like, I think that's really the definition of this movement, is that there is not a single definition for a specific space. There's all kind of flavors and scales and different attributes between all of these spaces. So I think it's becoming, really an interesting map, really. And I think we're seeing different types of directories that are starting to form of specific space DNAs, like we like to call them village DNAs, which you have different nomenclatures for different types of people. So you might have projects like OASA, which are one of our partners. I don't know if you saw them, they were just in Patagonia recently. But for example, they have a map of a few hundred projects all around the world, which are focused on projects at the intersection of ecology, arts, and technology. So that's a very specific sub-niche, but you have all kinds of different maps like this, which are basically building global network of projects. And, TDF belongs to that map, like through the arts and the ecology, but it also belongs to, for example, ReFi DAO or, also Green Pill. Like all of these kind of network kind of have their own flavor and they have their own subset of projects. And it's kind of possible to choose like through which angle you're coming into which project. So it's really quite a complex map of different things. Yeah, we've been really focused on, let's say, the spaces that are like physically real, that actually have land. We have a set of village founders that we've been in touch with, and that was something more recent. Let's say maybe 2-3 years ago that I started doing this. We started meeting up with the space founders from around Europe, more specifically, and more specifically projects that are interested in decentralized governance, that have this interest in technology, because a lot of the previous generation of eco-villages are kind of technophobic, like they really don't want to have technology in their day-to-day life. We see it as a tool that is impossible to escape and that we just need to leverage for to advantage, basically. And yeah, some of these projects, like we have been meeting at Chateau du Fay in France. They're hosting Faytopia community in the winter season. There's Liminal Village in Italy. There's so many projects that are flourishing everywhere and that we are connected to. But
The region coordination.
Exactly.
But yeah, I can see how it's not easy to know how to help each other, because there could be partnerships, there could be swaps of tokens, they could be sharing goods that you actually make. But at this stage, it's still very unclear because everyone's trying to find their own path to sustainability, starting from monetary sustainability, but eventually just like community sustainability. And
I think the whole economic piece is really showing to be like the scales and scope of the kind of Web3 networks at this point are unfortunately not really that supportive. Like, we're talking about Gitcoin grants, we're talking about funding for like planting actions with like Sylvie, for example, or all these kind of things. They're really like minor tickets when you compare that to the actual real estate needs of a project like TDF. We're talking about 5 million euro real estate investment, right? That needs to happen. And so this kind of amounts has just been not possible to do like on global scale yet. And I think the TDF token is basically starting to break that narrative, because we've sold about 400,000 euros of TDF tokens at this point. And so this is starting to become like real tangible assets. But then this is getting compounded by the fact that we also have investors from a more traditional sense that are lending money into the project at a fixed interest, compounded by also EU grants and banks and all these other types of funding mechanisms that are more suited to traditional real estate projects. And so because the whole project is tokenized, that means that the trust in this kind of decentralized land-based project can start to grow. And yeah, basically now we're looking at onboarding the 23 units for our co-housing development. And so those are 23 additional homes that we're going to be building and 23 people that will be buying an amount of token to gain access right to those houses. And we're talking about over 5 million euros of additional real estate capital that will be flowing through Web3 and coordinated through Web3. And I think this is really like the turning point. It's like if this can become a norm and something and an asset that people can trust, and they know that whatever happens, they can common. They can use their tokens no matter what's going on in the world, and as ecological systems are degrading, and whatever happens from an economic perspective and all of that, they have the safe haven that can actually cater to their basic needs. I think that's going to start to shift the game. And a lot of the projects that we're talking with are flirting with this idea of tokenizing and going the same route as CDF, but they're kind of waiting on seeing a full success case. So we're just building the success case year by year, adding more token holders, growing the technology and all of the regenerative systems that make this all possible. And basically, we're basically also getting more opportunities that enable us to leverage it more and just make the economic system stronger. One example is we're getting solar panels at 1/4 of the price from an energy company from the US that's donating it to a nonprofit at cost. And so that basically enables a new revenue stream without any kind of operational cost for the future. And so by doing more and more of these things, we can basically really create a case for a regenerative economic paradigm. And we're hoping to see more and more projects kind of follow that. And I think it's also happening in all kind of ways. And you have innovation happening from the ecological perspective of like, how do we actually do this syntropic agriculture thing, growing food from forest? How do we do, monetization of ecosystem credits, whether it's carbon credits, biodiversity credits, water credits, all of that. There's like so many ways that you can put economic value on top of what we're actually doing that is working with nature and in actually restoring nature, not just being sustainable and greenwashing, but actually creating systems that can work with life.
Can you give us some can you give us some examples of how you are leveraging Web3, not only with tokens, but because you mentioned the unbundle of the ownership, you mentioned it like uses, fructose, and abuses, and with blockchains and smart contracts, you can kind of unbundle that and create separate rules and automate that. Can you share a bit what you are experiment already, and your visions of how to leverage that in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's primarily through the token, right? Like this separating the rights is like you're purchasing the access right through the token and committing to the principles of regeneration that are defined. Like that's part of your purchase agreement. And then some of the stuff is what I mentioned as well around, tracking and monetizing ecosystem services. So the carbon credits that we're doing, for example, it's through Open Forest Protocol. That's also a decentralized and tokenized platform. So that is a Web3 primitive that is just bundled under our stack. The same thing for the biodiversity monitoring. We're using Simplex DNA, and eventually the objective is to have a life token representing how much life is actually present on your land. And I mean, those are just like very early days, but it's just like seeing how we can have more of these digital primitives that are actually representing something tangible in the real world. And that gets bound up under this tokenized economy. What we're also building towards that is a whole series of basically sensors to really be able to automate the capture of data and build like stronger base models for this kind of ecological projects. In like everything will basically be tracked, and that data will be automatically flowing into a protocol from energy consumption, water consumption, but also where is this water coming from? Is it city water? Is this borehole water? Is this water from the lakes that we've been doing? Seeing how much water we're actually infiltrating into the ground rather than taking out from it. And so really trying to represent all of these ecological metrics in data, and then having that data flow into somewhere where it can be used publicly. And then it can be interconnected to all kind of protocols that are working on all those different cross-section points. I would say, what else? I mean, otherwise, I think the main thing is our governance stack, like, with a proof presence, proof of sweat, and a token. I mean, ultimately, it's quite simple now. It's like we need a way to make decisions, and we need some data that proves that we're going in the right direction. And that's ultimately what we're trying to build for. And then whatever happens within that frame is, like, we see it as a good playground to try to just create a different way of life. Yeah.
And what are the challenges to integrate all this tech, this new technology with the participants of the projects, and how you are facing that, like how you solving that to include people in this complexity?
So like Eric said in the beginning, we're the first tokenized village in Europe. Also, actually, it's probably in the world. Like I haven't actually seen any village in the world that you can actually go and buy a token from that has like a legal representation of access right anywhere in the world. So the challenge that comes with that is that people don't really know what it means. They need to understand this whole token concept. And the challenge for us is onboarding people into Web3. Like, the UX of Web3 is just not user friendly, and it's still been causing issues. The way that we're dealing with it is by trying to abstract away as much as we can. So one thing that we introduced this year was, for example, a bank integration through Monerium. So now if you want to buy TDF tokens, you can actually just make a bank transfer to this IBAN. We receive crypto in the back end. We actually don't have a bank account for OASA. And so that means that you can now go and just make a simple bank transfer. You receive your tokens, and then you've been onboarded into Web3 with like as little hassle as possible. The only hassle you have to do with Web3 now to interact with TDF is like just having a MetaMask account or something, so you can have your tokens and interact with the basic systems that we have. But beside that, the goal is really to try to abstract it out. So we had also scoped out some work to even abstract the whole wallet layer. But we're still kind of seeing how much that makes sense, and what's the point where we want to just educate people versus like abstracting things away in the background. But that is definitely one of the challenges, and just shifting people's understanding and perspective around ownership. I think that is, our core challenge, but that's something that we're also really passionate about, because we really believe that this is actually the thing that can change our interaction with nature and our influence on nature, and that can prevent like the downfall of humanity. Is like we need to shift into a system that is working to the advantage of nature, and whether the economic and technological systems that we built will be compatible with life itself, like that is in question right now. Like, we don't know if humanity will make it past the next 50 years. So we need to build these systems that can really interact with life in a way that it supports it and that it doesn't just extract from it. And shifting this relationship at the end of the day, I mean, it's a Web3 thing, but it's much broader than that. It's like, how do we as a species really change our values towards better coordination? And and I think TDF is part of that story, and we're building the trust, and we're creating real assets. We're building real houses and real places where people actually want to be and live and make friends, and all of that, create belonging. And that by itself is creating the demand for the token and for adopting the systems, and for then expanding on the governance mechanics so that it can be scaled and we can keep welcoming more people into it.
And do you think these ideas are compatible? Like, this is like regenerative ideas. Do you think if we scale up that we can combine sustainability, regeneration with economic growth for communities that are still poor, are still still live in a low energy environment? Do you think we can bring that ideas and make them wealth?
Yeah, 100%. Like the solutions to climate change already exist. It's just that we're not using them. The main thing that's causing poverty right now is actually desertification and degradation of soils. If you talk to rural farmers,
Can you say that again?
the primary thing that's causing economic loss and lack of livability is degradation of soil and lack of water. If you talk to a rural farmer in remote India, the thing that's driving him to the city, it's not so much that he doesn't have access to blockchain or whatever. It's the fact that his land is dry. He's not able to grow food on it anymore. He's not able to provide for himself and for his family. And this kind of systems is very actually simple to regenerate. There's a guy called Rajendra Singh. He revived 14 rivers in India. He brought water back to 1,500 villages. And I met him here in Tamera in a nearby eco village in Portugal. And the way that he did it was by inspiring the local people, of showing them some simple techniques. How do you restore a water landscape? It's about slowing the water so that you actually capture all the rainwater that lands within your property, that you keep it there instead of having it flush and create problems downstream in the form of floodings and so on. And when we start to work with these kind of very simple regenerative systems, what it really means is that we as a human, we become the keystone species, we become the steward again, and we create the potential for life to flourish. But it's also an economic potential, because all of these farmers in those villages in India, they're actually starting to be able to go back to the villages. I think they started this work about 20 years ago, something like that. And at the time, the villages were emptying out because the people were going into the city to find some economic opportunities. And now, because the land is restored, they can actually go back to their land and have a viable way of life. Another huge example is the Loess Plateau in China. That's probably the biggest regeneration project that was ever done. It was funded by the World Bank. It was coordinated by the Chinese state. So, they're pretty efficient. And they restored millions and millions of hectares that was completely degraded soil. Same story. The farmers could not grow food anymore. They had below poverty level. They were almost not able to sustain themselves anymore. This massive regeneration project, and the wages went up, the economic activity came back, and so on and so on. So I think us as digital natives, we're a bit remote from this whole dependence on land because it's been abstracted out. But ultimately, even countries like the US or Europe or whatever, rich nations that have access to a lot of resources, they ultimately depend on land. And another thing that's been happening in the world is land grabs. Countries like Qatar and these kind of places where it's hard to grow food and that have depleted their water reserve, they are starting to produce food in other countries and displacing populations and all of that because of water scarcity and because of the lack of available resources to grow food. But ultimately, solving that challenge, actually regenerating the soil, is easy if you create a big enough incentive for people to actually do it. We know how to do it. It's super low tech. You can do it with shovels and whatever you need, or you can do it with excavators and bigger machinery. But ultimately, it's very simple. The second part is, once you've regenerated these commons, is how do you then govern them? That is the hard question. And I think nation states have failed at creating the solutions for that. They're failing at even creating anything that can help us to solve climate change. We're failing to coordinate on that kind of level. So I think when we can create an ecosystem that's actually restored, creating the local economic opportunities, getting other local people in the area to replicate those systems, that keeps expanding upward spiral of productivity in terms of land productivity, in terms of water conservation, in terms of the actual resources that makes life thrive. And then we need to impose some kind of governance system on top of those that people can abide by. And there's I don't know if you read this book called it's something about the commons from Elinor Ostrom, but she's talking about all of these systems that sit on top of commons. This was before blockchain existed, but there's all kind of ways that you can govern a common. The main common that she's giving as an example is water resources. There's all kind of streams and ponds and water infrastructure that has been collectively stewarded by these groups of, whether it's farmers and citizens and so on, and that have different way to organize. That is not necessarily based on market approaches, but you can kind of create new ways to collectively govern these commons. And I think that's kind of the critical point, is that we need to be able to steward those commons locally towards a greater ecological objective, as well as more prosperity, more economic growth, etc., etc. But I think the ecological reality kind of underpins a lot of this.
And more questions, but we won't have time.
Oh, one more thing. Can you repeat the city in China that you mentioned?
It's the Loess Plateau. There's this guy called Loess. There's a guy called John D. Liu who made a documentary about it. I highly recommend it, and it really gives you a sense of what's possible when you actually work together on something positive, like bring life back. And these two examples are really the two things that are really shining, I would say, in the world of regeneration, and that can give us a bit of hope as a humanity towards actually creating the conditions for humans to continue to thrive on this planet. Another great example that's starting to come up really strong now is the whole green belt in Africa. I don't know how many of these like half moons to retain waters have dug, but it's like in the millions, and that's really starting to show positive effects in terms of withholding the desert of the Sahara from expanding south, in terms of keeping those land able to sustain the local populations and so on. So yeah, I guess my challenge to the Web3 builders out there is like, let's go to places like that and actually work on building more commons in the real world. And Africa is really ripe to receive this kind of innovation. Celo, the blockchain that we're deployed on, has a huge presence in Africa. There's places where you have Celo, but you don't even have banks. And they're super willing to step into these kind of governance games and coordination that involves blockchain. And that is based on something tangible that will provide them food, not just something, not just generating some kind of digital yield from an infrastructure that will be extracting from us in the end.
One last quick question. Do you have any advice for builders in the space that are looking for like building this, and mainly in the technical legal side, how to set up all these entities, which kind of protection they should seek, and this kind of things? Like, do you have some advice for that?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we went with Switzerland as a jurisdiction to host OASA because it has like a strong legal jurisprudence of recognizing DAOs and tokens, and I would recommend that. I think most projects are basically in the phase where they're too small to really go out and tokenize, because you do need to invest like 100,000 euros or something like that to handle your tokenization process. Like, you're going to have technical costs, you're going to have legal costs. Like, there's just a lot of things to set up when you're trying to build this kind of token infrastructure. And also, if you're less than, say, 10 or 20 people that need to govern this common, like, you really don't need a token infrastructure. So really keep it small and simple. We started with a spreadsheet initially, and this is how we had a whole like initial token distribution. And just keep it simple, focus on what's going to actually create real economic activity, because building a land project is going to come with so many problems that you're going to have to solve. So adding the Web3 complexity, I think, it's great when you're looking at, maybe 5 years, 10 years down the road, and you actually have like tangible, a lot of assets on the balance sheet that you need to govern. But also 95% of projects will fail before they even get to that. So, have an agreement, really think about it. Come and check out TDF, and we have this platform that we can offer to anyone that wants to use it. And yeah, like try to see what's already existing, and really don't overcomplicate things in the beginning, but do think about the long term, how you can build multi-generational commons. And you can call it wealth, or you can call it restoration of nature, whatever you want to do. But that's the direction that I would encourage them to look at.
Amazing, Sam. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Nice. We go see TDF.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Ciao.